I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
Catherine made an unexpected choice 4 minutes after Princess Charlotte sobbed her way out of a royal rehearsal. By dusk, Camilla had lost all private control over Charlotte's ceremonial responsibilities, was prohibited from correcting her without a parent present, and faced the real threat of exclusion from future family gatherings if she crossed another line. Yet that order was never Catherine's first move. It was her final one. And once she signed it, nothing, not a royal title, a family explanation, or a quiet appeal, could undo what had been set down that night. The consequences would reach far beyond a single rehearsal. It began with one whispered phrase no camera ever caught. When Catherine finally understood those words, the entire dispute stopped being about posture, clothing, or palace etiquette. Through her shaken daughter, it became a warning about Catherine's own future. At 10:15 that morning, staff inside Buckingham Palace began preparing the state ballroom for an important ceremonial rehearsal. Every child had been assigned a place. Every entrance had been timed. Every position had been marked on the floor. Charlotte stood beside the spot reserved for her mother, a small card in her hand that showed her exact place in the procession. Then Catherine was called away. A protocol officer needed her approval on a timing adjustment at the far end of the room. The interruption should have lasted less than 5 minutes. William was elsewhere. Scarlett remained with her assistant. That brief absence created the opening that changed everything. Camilla's eyes moved first to Charlotte's hair, then to her coat, then to the empty space where Catherine should have been standing. The atmosphere in the room shifted even though the words themselves stayed quiet. A ceremonial coordinator set down his clipboard. A wardrobe assistant stopped writing. 2 household staff turned toward the doorway, waiting for Catherine's return. Charlotte kept her composure. She explained that the protocol officer had placed her there, and she held up the position card as proof. The answer was polite, clear, and accurate. Camilla's expression tightened. She asked why Charlotte believed she should stand so close to her mother when other family members had taken places farther back. Then came the order. She told the organizer to move Charlotte behind the junior attendants. The man hesitated. The approved procession chart said otherwise. The team had checked and confirmed Charlotte's place that very morning. Moving her would alter the entire visual order of the Wales family. Camilla repeated the instruction, slower this time. Charlotte turned toward the entrance, still hoping to see her mother. The staff later remembered the silence more than the words. No one interrupted the Queen. No one challenged her. Charlotte realized she was standing alone while everyone waited for someone else to act. At last she asked if she had done something wrong. Camilla stepped closer and spoke in a voice meant only for the child. The assistant caught only the final words, but the effect was immediate. Charlotte's shoulders dropped. She folded the position card in half, turned without looking back, and left the ballroom. The assistant found her by the private staircase at 10:40, trying not to cry and asking only for her mother. There was no loud scene, just a child trained to stay composed in public who could no longer explain what had been said to her. When Catherine arrived, Charlotte wanted to know if she could still stand beside her. By 11:05, the assistant, Charlotte, and 2 documents reached Catherine's private sitting room. The first was the official procession chart. The second was a revised version created after Catherine had left the ballroom. Charlotte's name had been crossed out and moved back. Beside the change sat a handwritten directive from Camilla's office. Catherine did not raise her voice. She asked for names. The assistant identified 5 witnesses. Before the afternoon ended, Catherine required each of them to provide a written statement. Then she asked what Camilla had whispered. The assistant revealed one detail that made Catherine close the folder and reach for the phone. Even though Charlotte still would not speak of it, Camilla had asked why the girl thought she would be allowed to stand next to her mother forever. Catherine requested a private apology first. Camilla's reply would force an urgent family meeting before nightfall. When the door closed at 11:12, the atmosphere in the sitting room changed. Charlotte stayed pressed against her mother's side, fingers tight on her sleeve. The assistant remained near the hearth with both charts, one clean, one altered. Catherine looked from the papers to her daughter and asked the simplest question, "What happened before you left the ballroom?" Charlotte tried to answer, but the words came slowly. Camilla had said her hair looked too soft for a formal procession. Then came the coat, too noticeable, the color too close to Catherine. Both had already been approved by the wardrobe team, yet Camilla treated every detail as proof that Charlotte had received more attention than she deserved. The tone made the remarks worse. Charlotte explained she had not chosen the place beside her mother, nor the coat, nor the hairstyle. Palace staff had assigned each of them. That answer did not satisfy Camilla. She asked why Charlotte was always positioned where cameras would find her. The assistant heard it as an accusation, even though it was framed as a question. Catherine's face did not change. She asked the assistant to repeat exactly what she had heard. The woman did so carefully. According to Camilla, royal children needed to understand they were not the center of every room. When Charlotte replied that she was only following the cards given to her, Camilla seemed more irritated than before. Timing records from the rehearsal desk later showed that Camilla summoned the ceremonial coordinator at 10:34. She instructed him to move Charlotte 3 places back, behind 2 junior attendants and away from Catherine. Because no such change had been authorized, he hesitated. Camilla then told him the Queen's directive was approval enough. In that moment, protocol became power. Charlotte looked at her card. Her name still sat beside Catherine's. Softly she asked if the original plan had been wrong. Plans can change, Camilla answered, once people begin to think their place is permanent. Several members of staff heard that sentence. None of them moved. None of them spoke. Then Camilla stepped closer still. The assistant saw Charlotte's face change, but could not catch every word that followed. Color drained from the child's cheeks. Confidence went with it. Charlotte folded the card, asked to leave, and was told that walking away would only prove she was unprepared for serious royal duties. After one more attempt to steady herself, she turned toward the hallway. The assistant followed at 10:40. Inside the sitting room, Catherine listened without interruption. She did not ask Charlotte to defend herself. She did not tell her to be brave. She did not excuse what had happened as a generational misunderstanding. Instead, she asked whether Charlotte wanted Camilla to speak to her again that day. Charlotte shook her head. That single answer settled the first decision. At 11:28, Catherine instructed her private secretary to contact the senior protocol officer. The call lasted 6 minutes. He confirmed that Charlotte's position had been authorized 2 days earlier and could not be altered by anyone in Camilla's office. More importantly, the coordinator had been ordered to make the change without informing Catherine. Catherine then requested the wardrobe approval sheet. It arrived at 11:43. Every detail of Charlotte's appearance, shoes, hair, coat had been cleared in advance. All of the criticisms made in the ballroom had already been examined and resolved. So why target them now? The shape of an answer was beginning to form. At 12:05, Catherine asked for a private conversation with Camilla. She did not demand punishment. She made no threat of exposure. She made 3 clear requests: restore the original procession place, give Charlotte a direct apology, and promise that the child would never again be corrected in private without Catherine, William, or an authorized Wales aide present. Camilla took her time answering. While Charlotte sat in the next room with the assistant, Catherine waited. The return call came at 12:20. Camilla's reply was firm. In her view, there had been no insult, so there would be no apology. Charlotte had received proper royal discipline and needed to understand that being Catherine's daughter did not place her beyond correction. Then came the sentence that ended any chance of a quiet resolution. According to Camilla, the Wales family had grown too accustomed to being treated as the future, as if the present no longer mattered. Catherine heard the real argument at last. This had never been about a coat, a hairstyle, or even Charlotte's place in line. It was about who stood next to her. At 12:32, she hung up the telephone and did not move. Camilla's words carried a clear meaning. Charlotte had not been corrected because she misunderstood protocol. She had been singled out because Camilla could no longer ignore the coming threat represented by the child's position beside Catherine. Catherine did not allow anger to take hold. She asked her private secretary to open a formal record. The first witness arrived at 12:41. The wardrobe assistant carried the approval papers the palace team had signed. She confirmed that Charlotte's appearance had been examined before rehearsal and that no concerns had been raised. She also remembered Camilla looking from Charlotte to the empty place beside her and asking why the child needed to stand so prominently. At 12:56, the second witness appeared, the ceremonial organizer who had received the order to move Charlotte. His account mattered. He explained that any last-minute change had to pass through the senior protocol officer because the procession plan had already been approved. That step never happened. Camilla gave him direct instructions. He also confirmed something Catherine had not yet noticed. After Charlotte left the ballroom, an assistant from Camilla's office brought over an updated chart. The alteration felt irregular, handwritten, and initialed in the lower corner. The document reached Catherine at 1:14. Charlotte's name carried a single line through it. She had been pushed behind the junior attendants. In the margin sat a brief instruction: get away from the Princess of Wales. This had nothing to do with posture, nothing to do with timing. It had everything to do with separation. Catherine read the line twice. Then she asked for William. William came through the private passageway at 1:27. All he had been told was that Catherine needed him and that Charlotte was upset. The moment he saw the chart, the witness statements, and the folded position card still in Charlotte's hand, the situation became clear. Anger rose first, quick, protective, personal. Catherine stopped him before he could leave the room. This could not become a conflict driven only by feeling. Camilla would reduce it to a family quarrel and dismiss fury as an overreaction. The only way to prevent that was to create a record that could never be altered. William listened. Then he sat down. At 1:39, the assistant who had followed Charlotte into the hallway gave her statement. She described the silence in the ballroom, the way Charlotte asked if she had done something wrong, and how the child's expression changed when Camilla leaned in. She remembered the last words, even though she could not repeat the full whispered sentence. Not forever. That fragment unsettled Catherine. It pointed toward a warning about what lay ahead, something Charlotte was still too frightened to discuss. By 2055 statements had been collected. Each witness had entered the room from a different place. Each described the same sequence: criticism, a shift in position, a private remark, Charlotte leaving in distress. The evidence no longer rested on one child's memory. At 2:18, Catherine instructed her secretary to prepare a sealed folder. Inside went the original procession plan, the altered chart, the wardrobe approval, the 5 statements, and the written record of Camilla's refusal to apologize. William added one more document, a draft limitation order. The language was restrained but firm. Camilla would no longer supervise Charlotte privately, adjust her ceremonial position, issue instructions to her attendants, or correct her without a parent or authorized Wales aide present. If another breach occurred, Camilla's attendance at family gatherings that included the Wales children would be reviewed. William signed the final page at 2:31. That signature changed the nature of the dispute. Catherine was acting as Charlotte's mother. William was both the Prince of Wales and her father. Together, they were no longer asking Camilla to show restraint. They were preparing to remove her freedom of action. Princess Anne was informed of the emergency meeting at 2:46. She did not contact Camilla. She called William. Her first question was whether Catherine had obtained the modified chart. William confirmed it. Then Anne asked whether the folder had been updated with earlier household complaints. William did not understand. A pause followed. Anne explained that staff had raised concerns before, remarks about the Wales children, attempts to reposition them during appearances, quiet instructions given after William and Catherine left the room. No one had wanted another palace dispute, so every issue had been handled in private. Silence had brought temporary peace. It had also allowed the pattern to continue. When William asked her to attend the meeting at 5:30, he thought she meant to calm the situation. Her reply removed all doubt. Do not walk into that room believing this began today. It did not. At 5:30, the audience room inside Buckingham Palace was sealed, doors closed, curtains drawn. 2 senior advisors sat waiting. Camilla entered, expecting a family discussion. Catherine arrived carrying the sealed folder. William took the seat beside her and chose the chair across from Camilla. No one offered tea. Catherine began with the timeline. Charlotte had taken the place assigned by the protocol office. At 10:15, Camilla ordered the positions changed. At 10:34, Charlotte left the rehearsal. At 12:20, Camilla refused a private apology and described the episode as royal discipline. Before Catherine could finish reading the first witness statement, Camilla interrupted. She claimed the room had simply misunderstood a standard correction. Children in public life, she said, could not expect their parents' presence to soften every instruction. Catherine did not argue. She opened the folder. The first item was the clothing approval sheet. Charlotte's shoes, hair, and coat had already been cleared. Camilla glanced at the page and dismissed it as unimportant. Catherine placed the second document beside it, the original procession chart. Charlotte's name sat directly after Catherine's. Then came the altered copy. A line struck through Charlotte's name. Another mark pushed her behind the junior attendants. In the margins sat the instruction that changed the meaning of the morning. Get away from the Princess of Wales. The room fell silent. Camilla said the wording had been interpreted too literally. The purpose, she insisted, had only been to increase spacing. One advisor asked why the change had not been accompanied by any measurement. There was no answer. Catherine read the first statement. The wardrobe assistant recalled Camilla asking why Charlotte was so often placed where cameras would find her. The ceremonial coordinator confirmed he had been told the Queen's directive was sufficient approval. The assistant described Charlotte asking if she had done something wrong. 3 voices, the same sequence. Camilla leaned back and remarked that staff often repeated what they believed senior royals wished to hear. William spoke then. The witnesses, he said, had not seen one another's accounts. They had been questioned separately and at different times. Their words matched because the events matched. He set Charlotte's folded position card on the table. It still carried her name, creased down the middle. Camilla looked away. William stated that no one would alter Charlotte's ceremonial duties without the consent of her parents or the Wales household. Camilla replied that parental preference could not decide family standing. William answered that he was not seeking to protect his daughter from discipline. He was drawing a line. Catherine then outlined the proposed restrictions. Camilla would not supervise Charlotte privately. She would not move her in a procession. She would not issue instructions to the child's attendants. She would not correct Charlotte unless William, Catherine, or an authorized representative was present. The final clause carried the weight. If another incident occurred, Camilla's participation in ceremonies involving the Wales children would be reviewed. Camilla's face hardened. She accused Catherine of attacking the Queen's reputation over one awkward conversation. Catherine answered that a private apology could have settled the matter. Camilla had chosen refusal. The documents and the witnesses had made the rest inevitable. Anne opened a second folder. Until that moment, Camilla had believed the discussion concerned only Charlotte. Anne changed that. She recounted an earlier reception in which one of Camilla's staff had tried to reposition Prince George without speaking to his parents. She recalled a church rehearsal in which, after Catherine left the room, one of the Wales children received sharp correction. She produced 2 household complaints about comments that the children were receiving too much attention and were being trained to behave as if the next reign had already begun. Every grievance had been resolved quietly, no written restriction, no public dispute, no consequence. Anne looked directly at Camilla and said that silence had been mistaken for permission. The private secretary resumed writing. Camilla denied the claims and asked why no formal family meeting had ever been called. Anne replied that for years everyone had protected unity, even when it meant asking younger members of the family to absorb the discomfort. That agreement no longer held. One advisor requested the earlier notes. Anne passed copies across the table, dates, locations, staff names, brief transcripts of conversations once thought too minor to record. Together they formed a pattern that could no longer be ignored. Catherine had entered the room prepared to defend her daughter. Anne had arrived prepared to reveal years. The private secretary presented Camilla with the restriction notice at 6:42 and asked her to confirm receipt. Camilla refused. She pushed the paper back across the table, insisting that Catherine lacked authority to place limits on the Queen. The senior advisor did not return it. He turned to the final page, already signed by William at 2:31, and answered calmly, "It cannot be enforced by the Princess of Wales alone." The Prince of Wales, has already shown that he is capable of doing so. Camilla was silent for several seconds. The signature at the bottom had closed the opening she intended to use. Catherine was no longer requesting civility. William's authority and support and the presence of two senior palace officials had turned the boundaries into written fact. Around 6:45, one councillor explained the notice in practical terms. Camilla's office could no longer contact Charlotte's attendants with private instructions. It could not alter her position, approve her attire, summon her for correction, or arrange rehearsals without a Wales representative present. Every direction concerning Charlotte would now reach Catherine and William first. Officials near the child were also held responsible. Any assistant who received an unauthorized request had to record it and notify the Wales household at once. No silent correction, no private rearrangement, no instruction disguised as routine. Camilla still asked whether the restriction would appear in the palace's official records. The advisor said yes. That single word carried more weight than everything before it. A private disagreement could be denied. A family quarrel could be softened or rewritten later. An assigned notice was different. Names, dates, witnesses, and conditions were now fixed. Anyone who tried to undo it would first have to explain why it had been issued. At 6:51, the private secretary read the warning clause aloud. If another allegation about Charlotte was substantiated by staff evidence, Camilla's attendance at events involving the Wales children would be reviewed immediately. The wording did not remove her from public life. It simply removed the idea that she could act without consequence. Camilla gripped the paper more tightly. She did not look at Catherine. Instead, she asked the advisors if they understood the damage such a restriction could cause if it became public. One of them answered that allowing the same problem to continue after the palace had been warned would cause far greater harm. The focus of the discussion had shifted from reputation to accountability. Catherine signed beneath William's name at 6:58. Her hand remained steady. She asked that a copy be delivered to Charlotte's household before the evening ended, added the time, and closed the folder. William stayed beside her, calm now but unmoving. The notice was given to Camilla. For the first time that night she turned toward Catherine. There was no apology. Catherine did not ask for one again. At 7:10, Camilla's private secretary telephoned to confirm receipt. The restriction was in force. Charlotte was restored to her original place in the procession. Her approved clothing remained unchanged. A member of the Wales household would stand with her through the next rehearsal and the ceremony itself. Outside the chamber, preparations continued as if nothing had occurred. Staff carried flowers along the corridor. Footmen checked doors. Musicians studied timing sheets. The palace moved with its usual precision, concealing the boundary that had just been drawn. Catherine returned to the Wales apartment just after 7:30. She expected Charlotte to be relieved that her place had been restored. Instead, the child thanked her quietly and asked whether Camilla would still attend the ceremony. Catherine said yes. Charlotte's gaze dropped. That response disturbed Catherine more than the earlier tears. Dinner arrived at 8:05, but Charlotte barely touched it. She answered questions politely, claimed she was tired, insisted she was fine. Yet every time footsteps sounded outside the room, she turned toward the door. Catherine began to understand that the restriction had solved the visible problem, not the hidden one. Later, at 8:47, she found Charlotte still awake in her bedroom. The procession card lay flattened under a book on the bedside table, as if the child were trying to erase the crease. Catherine sat beside her and said a new card would be ready in the morning. Charlotte did not ask about the card. She asked something else. "Mommy, can someone move you away too?" The question stopped Catherine. Until that moment, she had believed Camilla's private remark was meant only to make Charlotte feel small. Now she saw another possibility. Charlotte had not left the ballroom solely from fear for herself. Something about her mother had reached her. "What did Camilla say?" Catherine asked. Charlotte hesitated, then spoke the first sentences in a voice barely above a whisper. "You can stand next to your mother now, but she won't always be able to decide who belongs where." Catherine remained silent. The words had nothing to do with spacing or posture or clothing. Charlotte had understood enough of Camilla's message about Catherine's future to be frightened. At 8:52, Catherine asked her to repeat the sentence, not because she distrusted her, but because the exact language mattered. Charlotte said it again. When Catherine asked if anyone else had spoken, the child explained that Camilla had said certain people were being placed too near the center too early, and that when people grew too comfortable, royal rules could be changed. Catherine held her daughter and told her no adult had the right to make her responsible for arguments between the older members of the family. Charlotte had done exactly as she was told. Nothing about her had been wrong. The shame belonged elsewhere. At 9:06, Catherine called William into the sitting room and repeated Charlotte's words. His expression changed. The existing limits protected Charlotte from private correction, yet the deeper issue remained. Camilla had drawn a child into a contest over control, succession, and influence. At 9:14, William telephoned the palace secretary. The notice was reopened. A new clause was added. Camilla was forbidden to speak to their children about William's future reign, Catherine's future role, or the standing of the Wales family. If George, Charlotte, or Louis were ever drawn into questions of status, Camilla's place at family ceremonies would be reviewed at once. This was no longer a caution, it was a wall. Anne received a copy of the revision at 9:31 and supported it immediately. Children, she said, could not be used as messengers in conflicts they had neither started nor understood. The updated notice reached Camilla's office at 9:48. There was no protest, no telephone call, no attempt to reopen the conversation. A written acknowledgement arrived at 10:03. The palace had accepted Catherine's final demand. The next morning, Charlotte returned to the state ballroom. A fresh, unmarked procession card waited in her place. Her name appeared beside Catherine's exactly as before. The clothing approvals stood unchanged. A senior Wales aide stood nearby, close enough to hear every instruction. A few minutes later, Camilla entered. She saw that the position had been restored. She saw the aide. She said nothing. That silence told the room everything. The rehearsal began. Charlotte looked once at the card, lifted her head, and took her place. Catherine stood beside her. From the far side of the room, William watched. Anne remained at the back, quiet but attentive. No one moved Charlotte. No one asked why she should be there. No one approached her in private. To the public, the ceremony looked effortless. Cameras recorded smiles, order, and royal perfection. What they never captured was the paper now held in the palace record, the document that decided who could speak to Charlotte, who could guide her, and who would answer if another line was crossed. Catherine made no spectacle of it. That was why it worked. She did not answer humiliation with a public display. She gathered witnesses. She secured the papers. She asked for a personal apology. When that failed, she removed the possibility that it could happen again. Yet the victory carried a cost. Charlotte would remember turning toward a doorway and finding her mother gone. Catherine would remember her daughter's question, could someone also move her mother? Royal smiles could not repair the damage done to trust. Camilla continued as queen. She kept her household, her ceremonial place, and her title, but in the presence of the Wales children, she had lost something essential, unquestioned access. From that day forward, every instruction would be heard, every change recorded, every private correction required a witness. Catherine had not cut Camilla from the family, she had simply taken away the shadows.